So when the TISSOT PRX first came out in 2021, the watch community went crazy for it, with that Gerald Genta-esque integrated bracelet design, TISSOT and SWATCH GROUP build quality, and a wallet-friendly $400 price point. I never really understood what all the fuss was about, but I'm going to be showing you two of the latest PRX models today, and I've got to admit that one of them has really won me over. But stick around to the end of this video, guys, to find out which, because it might not be the one that you'd expect. Now, if I had a pound or dollar for every one of the column inches that have been written about the TISSOT PRX, or for all of the minutes of footage about it on YouTube, I'd be a very wealthy man. So I'm not going to bore you with another deep dive into the history of the PRX today, and to be completely honest, when TISSOT reached out to me and asked if I wanted to check out a couple of the newer versions of this model line, I almost politely declined. After all, it's a watch that never excited me. I wanted to like it, especially when TISSOT brought out the automatic version with the Powermatic 80 movement. But contrary to all the rave reviews that talk about how well that 40mm version wears, I tried one on about a year ago, and I distinctly remember thinking that it wore much larger than those dimensions suggested. With that stainless steel integrated bracelet and the way it articulates, or rather doesn't, it gives the 40mm PRX an effective lug-to-lug measurement of more than 51mm, and that just really didn't mould to my skinny wrist. But like a horological remake of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, earlier this year TISSOT released a 35mm automatic PRX, and they sent me this version with the mother-of-pearl dial to check out. It's the same watch, just smaller. Too small for a man's wrist, some might say, and I suspect when TISSOT was setting out to design a smaller version of its PRX, they chose 35mm because it would be more likely to appeal to a female audience. To be a true unisex watch, I think a middle ground somewhere between 35 and 40mm, let's say 37mm, might have been a better choice. But while it's definitely the smallest watch that I've worn, it doesn't feel quite as small as I was expecting given its 35mm case. Now sure, I've got smaller than average wrists at just over 6¼ inches, and I accept that it's probably not going to suit those with a wrist size much beyond 7 inches. But visually I think the smaller proportions give the PRX a slightly different look. While both the case and dial have been reduced almost in proportion on this 35mm version compared to its bigger brother, by reducing the case size it means the bracelet needn't be so wide where it meets the lugs, and the taper to the clasp isn't as dramatic. Personally I think this is a good thing, since I've often thought that the stainless steel bracelet on the 40mm version looks unusually wide at the lugs and it tapers sharply. Strangely though, I've never felt the same concerns about the versions available on the leather or the rubber strap. As with all automatic PRX models, and in order to differentiate them from their quartz siblings, this new 35mm PRX Powermatic 80 has the waffle dial. On this white dial version, the dial is actually mother of pearl, which looks almost opaline with a subtle pearlescent effect when the light catches it at certain angles. And I think this white dial looks great, though black, blue and green dial versions are also available. The laser engraved waffle pattern on the dial is done really well too, and it stands up to scrutiny under a loupe, or in this case, a macro lens. And I think this high level of finishing is one of the things that surprised me most during my time with this 35mm PRX. On my previous encounters with the PRX model line, the finishing never struck me as being particularly impressive. But it was one of the first things I noticed when unboxing this watch, and in the week or so that I've spent with it, I was frequently taken aback by just how well finished it is. Frankly, it's remarkable for a watch that costs £650 here in the UK, or around $700 if you're in the US. And it's not just the dial that's well finished either, but there's a refined level of brushing and polishing on the case, and on the bracelet too. The bracelet looks good, and because the links are smaller on this 35mm version, the bracelet articulates really well too. It fastens with a butterfly clasp, and because of that you don't get any micro adjustment in the clasp, which is a negative. But while I didn't resize this one as I only had it for a short amount of time, the smaller link should mean that most people will be able to get a good fit. Now, while doing my research into the PRX model line, I came across another version that was released earlier this year, and I asked the good folks at TISSOT if they would send me one to check out. Now, this one was a bit of a surprise to me. I think it's largely gone under the radar of the watch media, and I don't think that it's had the coverage that it deserves. This white dial 40mm quartz PRX comes on a white rubber strap, and compared to some of the other versions with more colourful dials, I can see why this one might seem a little ordinary. The rubber strap definitely gives the PRX a more sporty edge. It integrates perfectly into the case, and it's really supple, so it conforms to the wrist really well, and is ideally suited to smaller wrists like mine. It fastens with a simple pin buckle, which is brushed and signed. Now, while I can understand it if you're thinking there's nothing remarkable about this PRX, this simple white dial quartz watch has a really neat little party trick. You see, when the lights go down, the dial on this PRX comes alive, because this one has a fully lumed dial. And in the week or so I've been wearing this watch, I've never tired of seeing that dial light up when coming out of bright sunlight and into shade. I mean, who doesn't love lume, right? It reminds me of the Hoya Night Diver from the 1980s, and Tag Heuer recently released an Aqua Racer with a fully lumed dial that pays homage to that watch. But the Aqua Racer costs over £3,000. This little Tissot, by comparison, costs about a tenth of that at just £320. So while the 35mm PRX Powermatic 80 gave me a new appreciation for this model line with its impressive finishing, if I buy a PRX, I'm pretty sure it'll be this entry-level quartz version with its white dial and white rubber strap. Sure, I wish it had the waffle dial and an automatic movement, but there's a lot to be said for the clean look and the unfailing legibility you get with this white dial. And while colours are subjective, for me the white dial and white rubber strap is a killer combination and the perfect summer watch, if not the perfect Garda watch. Not only is it a good looker, but I've also been won over by how comfortable it feels on the wrist, with that rubber strap helping to reduce the weight, and the incredibly thin case profile of just 10.4mm that you get with the quartz PRX. And of course that incredible fully lumed dial just brings out the big kid in me and puts a big smile on my face every time I see it lit up. But guys, tell me what you think of the TISSOT PRX, and which of the many versions is your favourite, or indeed if you own one of these much loved watches. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you guys soon.